I'm Jake, 36 years old, and I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who'd walk out of a family dinner in silence. Not out of anger, but out of something colder. Disbelief. The kind that leaves your chest tight and your mind replaying the same moment over and over, wondering how it got that far. It wasn't about money or gifts or even respect anymore. It was about my son and the moment my own mother made him feel like he didn't belong in his own family. To understand that night, you have to understand what family gatherings used to mean to me. I grew up in a house where appearances mattered more than anything. My mom, Linda, loved to play the part of the perfect hostess. Table set to magazine standards, laughter loud enough for the neighbors to hear, and a smile that always seemed a bit too polished. My dad was quieter, the kind of man who stayed in the background and nodded along with whatever she said. My younger sister, Megan, was the golden child. She could burn toast, and somehow Mom would call it rustic. I could bring home straight A's and get, well, that's expected. That was our rhythm growing up. Megan sparkled, and I was just there. When I became a father, I swore my son, Evan, would never feel that same invisible weight. He's 8, shy, a bit bookish, but funny in that sharp, quiet way kids can be when they're paying more attention than people realize. He loves puzzles, drawing, and wearing mismatched socks just to annoy his grandma. My wife, Claire, always said he got my heart and her stubbornness. Together, we built a small, simple life that felt peaceful until we stepped back into the orbit of my family. It started small, as it always does. Little jabs wrapped in smiles. My mom would compare Evan to Megan's son, Oliver, who's a year older and already being called a little genius for playing travel soccer. Look at him, so athletic. You should get Evan into something, she'd say. He's not really the sporty type, Mom, I'd reply. Maybe that's the problem, she'd shoot back with a smirk. Megan would laugh like it was harmless teasing, but Evan heard every word. This Christmas dinner was supposed to be different. That's what Claire told me as we wrapped gifts that morning. Let's just get through it, she said, her hand resting on my shoulder. For Evan, she always tried to see the best in people, even when I couldn't. My mom insisted on hosting again, her annual family Christmas feast. The same over-decorated house, the same smell of baked ham and expensive candles, the same script we'd all played out for years. When we arrived, I noticed immediately that Megan and her family were already there. Mom had them seated near the fireplace, the good seats, as she used to call them. Claire and I were placed on the far end of the table, next to a chair missing its cushion. Evan didn't say a word. He just tugged my sleeve and whispered, "Can I sit by Grandma?" Before I could answer, Mom chirped, "Oh, honey, Oliver's sitting there. You can sit next to your dad, okay?" Her tone was sweet, but it was the kind of sweet that stings if you listen closely. Dinner went as it always did. Mom bragged about Oliver's trophies. Megan showed off her new watch, a gift from Mom. "She's too generous," she said. Claire tried to steer the conversation toward light topics, asking about travel or recipes, but everything looped back to the same orbit. Oliver's achievements, Megan's new car, Mom's generosity. I stayed quiet, chewing slowly, my eyes drifting toward Evan. He pushed peas around his plate, pretending not to hear the constant praise being showered on his cousin. Then came the gifts. Mom had this tradition. Every year after dinner, she'd bring out matching presents for everyone. She said it symbolized family unity. The year before, it was personalized blankets. The year before that, engraved mugs. This year, she came out with a pile of neatly wrapped boxes tied in red ribbons. "Matching watches," she announced proudly. "For my family." Everyone clapped, even Dad, though he didn't look particularly thrilled. She handed one to Megan, one to her husband, one to Oliver, then to me, Claire, and then stopped. She turned toward Evan, smiled thinly, and said, "Oh, not for him." The room went silent. The wrapping paper in Megan's hand froze mid-tear. I blinked, thinking maybe I misheard. "What?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Mom chuckled, the kind of laugh she used when she thought she was being clever. "He doesn't deserve one, Jake. Maybe next year if he learns some manners." It felt like someone punched the air out of my chest. Evan's face, I'll never forget it. His eyes darted down, his lips pressed together, and he gave this tiny, awkward smile, like he wanted to make it easier for everyone else. "It's okay, Dad," he whispered. My hand tightened around my glass. "Mom," I said slowly. "What do you mean, he doesn't deserve one?" She sighed dramatically. Jake, please, don't start. He was rude to me earlier, remember? When I said hello, he just mumbled something. I'm not rewarding bad behavior. He's 8, I said, my voice shaking now. He was shy. You embarrassed him in front of everyone. But she just shrugged, turning back to Oliver, who was showing off his new watch. Well, maybe he could learn from Oliver, she said. Such a polite young man. Megan giggled like it was a joke. Dad cleared his throat, muttering something under his breath, but didn't intervene. Claire's hand found mine under the table, her grip trembling. Evan tried to act like it didn't matter. That's what broke me. He pretended. He smiled and said, It's fine, Grandma. I don't even like watches. His voice cracked on the last word. No one said anything after that. The sound of tearing wrapping paper filled the silence. Mom beamed as Megan showed off her gift, like nothing had happened. My pulse was pounding so loud I could barely hear her. My son sat there, shrinking into himself, pretending to focus on the ham on his plate. Every instinct in me screamed to grab him and walk out, but something inside me, maybe the years of biting my tongue, told me to wait. So I sat there, silent, watching, memorizing every word, every smirk, every glance. I wanted to see how far she'd go. When dessert came, Mom made a show of bringing out a special box, a second gift, just for Oliver. You've been such a good boy this year, she said sweetly. Grandma's proud of you. He tore it open, revealing a brand new tablet. Evan's fork froze midair. Claire's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. I could feel her leg bouncing under the table, a silent storm building. Mom must have noticed our silence because she turned to me with that faux concerned tone. Oh, come on, Jake, don't look so serious. You know I love all my grandchildren. She glanced at Evan. Some just make it easier to show. Megan laughed. Mom, she said, pretending to scold her, but the laughter lingered. Dad just stared down at his plate. I looked at my son again, at the way he swallowed hard, at the way his little hand clenched around his napkin. And in that moment, something in me finally broke. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the hardwood, and said quietly, We're done here. The room froze. Jake, don't be dramatic, Mom said, her voice sharp now. It's Christmas. I didn't answer. Claire stood up too, gently taking Evan's hand. Let's go, sweetheart, she whispered. He looked up at her, confused, but followed. As we reached the door, Mom called after me. Oh, and Jake. I stopped, my back to her. You still owe me for dinner, she said, laughing under her breath. I didn't turn around. I just exhaled, slow and steady, and opened the door. The cold air outside hit my face like a wake-up call. I didn't say a word on the drive home. Evan fell asleep in the back seat, clutching the small sketchbook he'd brought with him, the one he'd hoped to show Grandma. It was hours later when my phone buzzed. A message from Mom. You still owe me for dinner, it read again. And then, you made a scene for no reason. I stared at it for a long time. Then I laughed, not because it was funny, but because something in me had finally shifted. That laugh was the sound of a line being crossed one too many times. And deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. The next morning, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Evan was still asleep in his room, curled up in his blanket, his sketchbook open beside him. He'd drawn a Christmas tree, but the ornaments were all different shapes, none of them matching. I stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching him. Something about that drawing hit me harder than I expected. The night before had already replayed 100 times in my head. Mom's words, Megan's laughter, that forced little smile on Evan's face. But seeing it through his eyes made it real in a different way. He wasn't just embarrassed. He'd been hurt. And the worst part? He thought it was normal. Claire came up behind me, whispering, He's still sleeping? Yeah, I said softly. Didn't even touch the cookies you baked for him last night. She sighed. He pretended he was tired. I think he just didn't want to talk about it. We stood there for a moment, neither of us saying what we were really thinking. Then she added, Your mom texted me too. I turned. What did she say? Something about hoping we won't hold grudges and how you embarrassed her in front of everyone. Claire handed me her phone. Sure enough, there it was, a message full of half apologies and passive-aggressive jabs. Family shouldn't take things so personally. I was just teaching Evan a lesson. You used to act out too, and you turned out fine. I almost laughed. Fine, I muttered. Yeah, sure. Claire crossed her arms. She's not going to change, Jake. You know that. I know, I said. But I also know this isn't over. She's going to twist it. And she did, faster than I thought possible. By noon, my sister called. I didn't even want to pick up, but curiosity won. Hey, I said flatly. Jake, what was that last night? Megan's voice was chipper, but there was that undertone. The one that made it sound like she was doing me a favor by even speaking to me. What do you mean? Mom said you just stormed out. You ruined Christmas dinner. Everyone was so uncomfortable. Uncomfortable. I repeated. She humiliated my kid in front of everyone. Oh, come on, Megan laughed. You're exaggerating. She just didn't have an extra gift, that's all. She said he didn't deserve one. I snapped. Well, Megan said. He did ignore her when she said hi earlier. I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. He's 8, Megan. I'm just saying, she continued. You've always been too sensitive about things like this. You make Mom feel like she can't do anything right. I didn't respond. Because if I had, I would have said something I couldn't take back. Megan sighed dramatically. Look, I get that you're protective of Evan, but maybe you should talk to Mom and apologize. You know how she is. She just wants everyone to get along. Yeah, I said quietly. She wants everyone to get along as she's the one being worshipped. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said and hung up. I stood in the kitchen for a while, phone still in my hand. Claire looked up from her coffee. Let me guess. Megan thinks you're the problem. Bingo. She's predictable, Claire said, sipping her cup. What's next? A family group chat message trying to smooth things over? I gave a humorless laugh. Oh, you mean like the one that just popped up? I opened my phone again. Mom had sent a photo, everyone smiling around the dinner table from last night. The caption read, even with some drama, it was a lovely Christmas. So grateful for family. Right under it, Megan commented. So true. Family is everything. No mention of us. No mention of Evan. And yet, within minutes, my cousins and a few extended relatives started liking the post, chiming in with looks perfect and wish we could have been there. Perfect. That was always her word. Perfect house. Perfect daughter. Perfect grandson. Just not a perfect son. The days that followed were quiet, but there was this heaviness that didn't lift. Evan barely spoke about Christmas. Every time someone mentioned gifts on TV, he'd change the channel. I tried to take him out. We went to the park, got ice cream even though it was freezing, but he wasn't himself. Then, one night, while he was in bed, Claire found something in the trash. A half-torn piece of paper. She opened it carefully and looked at me with this mix of sadness and anger. You need to see this. It was a drawing Evan had made. Grandma sitting on a big chair with a crown, everyone around her smiling. Except for him. He was off in the corner, holding nothing in his hands. And above his head, he'd written in shaky handwriting, maybe next year I'll be good enough. I sat down hard, my throat tightening. She's not doing this to him again, I said quietly. Claire didn't say anything. She just nodded because she knew I meant it. But of course, Mom wasn't done. A week later, she called out of the blue. Jake, you've been ignoring me, she said cheerfully, as if nothing had happened. I've been busy, I said. Well, I was thinking, let's do a family brunch this Sunday. You, Claire, and Evan can come over. I'll make pancakes. Oliver's been asking if he can show Evan his new tablet. I almost laughed at that. You think that's a good idea? Oh, stop being so dramatic, she said. They're cousins, Jake. You can't keep them apart just because you got your feelings hurt. My feelings? Mom, you embarrassed an 8-year-old. She sighed like I was exhausting her. Jake, he needs to learn how the world works. You can't protect him from everything. Sometimes tough love is what makes kids stronger. Tough love, I said. You excluded him in front of everyone. Oh, please, she snapped. You're making it sound like I hit him. I just didn't give him a watch. Maybe next year if he behaves. I hung up. That night, Megan texted me again. You really shouldn't hang up on Mom. She's just trying to fix things. I didn't reply, but what she said next, 2 days later, was worse. Evan had been invited to a small family event, a belated kids' New Year's party that Mom always threw for the grandkids. I wasn't planning to go. Claire and I agreed it was better to skip it this time. But while I was at work, Mom apparently called Claire directly. She was all sweet, promising it'd just be a fresh start. Claire, trying to keep peace, reluctantly agreed to take Evan for a short visit. When I came home, Evan was in his room again, quiet. I asked him how it went. He shrugged. It was fine. Just fine. He nodded. Grandma said I could play a game on Oliver's tablet if I gave him one of my drawings. So I did. But then she said I could only play for a minute because I was being too loud. I froze. She said that. Yeah, he said softly. Then she told Oliver he's going to be an artist one day too and told me to share nicely. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive over there and tell her exactly what she was doing. But I didn't. Because at that point, I knew words didn't matter to her anymore. Only control did. Later that night, I overheard Claire whispering on the phone, her voice low but tense. No, Linda, that's not what happened, she said. He's a child. You don't get to decide what lessons he needs. She paused. You need to stop saying things like that around him. Another pause. Then Claire's tone hardened. If you want to see your grandson, you're going to treat him with respect. Period. She hung up and just sat there on the couch, exhaling shakily. She said she was just joking, Claire muttered. But you should have heard her tone. I sat down beside her. We need to cut contact, at least for a while. I know, she said quietly, but it's going to blow up. And it did, spectacularly. The next day, Mom sent out another group message, this time to the whole extended family. A long, emotional post about how she was heartbroken that her ungrateful son was keeping her from seeing her grandson. She said she was being punished for caring too much. Within hours, people were commenting things like, "So sorry, Linda, you don't deserve this, and family can be so cruel sometimes." Megan even added, "You did your best, Mom. Some people just can't forgive." I didn't reply, but I could feel the shift. Relatives who once chatted with me at gatherings started going silent online. One even unfriended me. Another sent a private message. "What happened? Your mom said you yelled at her in front of everyone." I stared at the screen, trying to decide if it was worth explaining. But how do you explain something like that to people who've never seen behind a mask? To them, she was Linda, the sweet, smiling grandmother who hosted perfect dinners and posted family photos every Christmas. To me, she was the woman who could wound you with a sentence and make you feel guilty for bleeding. Evan, meanwhile, was still carrying it. One night, while I was tucking him in, he whispered, "Dad, do you think Grandma just doesn't like me?" That question nearly broke me. I felt the words stick in my throat. "Buddy, Grandma has her own problems. It's not about you." He frowned. "But she likes Oliver." I forced a smile. "That's because she spends more time with him. You didn't do anything wrong." He nodded, though I could tell he didn't believe me. Okay. After he fell asleep, I sat there for a long time. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was done. Done being quiet, done being polite, done letting her rewrite the story. She'd humiliated my son, twisted the truth, and tried to make me the villain. And the thing about people like my mom, they never see the storm coming until it's already over them. Because when I laughed at her message that night, "You still owe me for dinner," it wasn't out of bitterness anymore. It was because I finally realized something she never did. She'd spent her life trying to teach everyone a lesson. Now it was my turn, and the way she'd learn it would hurt more than she ever expected. It was around mid-January when everything seemed to calm down, at least on the surface. Mom stopped calling for a while. Megan had gone quiet, and I honestly started thinking maybe they'd decided to leave us alone. For a couple of weeks, life felt almost peaceful again. Evan was doing better too. He started drawing again, this time pictures of dragons and mountains and faraway castles instead of people. Claire and I thought we might finally be past the worst of it. But like always with my mother, silence wasn't peace. It was preparation. It started with an email. I was at work when it came through, a message from Evan's school with the subject line, "Concern regarding Evan's behavior." My stomach dropped immediately. I opened it, scanning the message quickly. "Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, we received a call from a family member expressing concern that Evan may be struggling emotionally at home due to recent family conflict. We'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss this further." A family member. I knew exactly who it was before I even finished reading. When I got home that evening, Claire was already pacing the kitchen, the same email open on her phone. She called the school. "Jake," she said, her voice trembling. "She actually called and said Evan was being neglected because of your pride." I clenched my jaw. "Neglected?" She told them we've been isolating him, that he's not seeing his family, that we're projecting our issues onto him. She made it sound like we're abusing him. I finished for her, feeling the heat rise in my chest. Claire slammed her phone on the counter. "What's wrong with her? Who does that?" "My mother," I said bitterly. "That's who." The next day, We had to sit through a meeting with the school counselor. Evan sat outside drawing while Claire and I explained that there was no neglect, no conflict affecting him except his grandmother's constant manipulation. The counselor was polite but cautious. It's not uncommon for grandparents to express concerns if they feel cut off, she said gently. But we do have to follow up when these things are reported. Claire's eyes filled with tears. She humiliated him at Christmas. We've been trying to protect him. The counselor nodded, but I could tell she'd heard similar stories from both sides before. To her, it was just another family dispute. To us, it was a line crossed so far it was barely visible anymore. When we got home, Evan was sitting on the couch with his backpack on his lap. "Am I in trouble?" he asked quietly. "No, buddy," I said, kneeling beside him. "Why would you think that?" "Grandma said at school that I looked sad," he said. "She told my teacher she was worried about me." "Did I make you and Mom look bad?" Claire covered her mouth, turning away. I felt something break inside me. "You didn't do anything wrong, Evan." She shouldn't have said that. He nodded slowly, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. Kids don't understand manipulation. They just internalize it. I called my mother that night. She picked up on the second ring, her voice dripping with smug sweetness. "Jake, how nice of you to finally call. I was worried about Evan." "Why did you call his school?" I said, cutting her off. "Excuse me. You heard me. You told them we were neglecting him." She laughed softly, the kind of laugh that made my skin crawl. "I didn't say that. I just told them I was concerned. He's been so quiet lately, and you haven't let me see him. I thought maybe something was wrong." "Something is wrong, Mom," I said. "You're the problem." "Oh, Jake, always so dramatic," she sighed. "If you weren't so defensive, maybe you'd realize I'm just trying to help." "Help?" I snapped. "You embarrassed him in front of the family, then tried to make us look like bad parents. That's not helping." "You've always been ungrateful," she said quietly, her tone suddenly hard. "All I've ever done is try to make sure you and your family are cared for. You're the one who keeps rejecting me. Maybe that's why Evan's so confused. He's learning it from you." I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. That was when the real fallout began. A few days later, I got a text from my cousin, Mark. "Hey, man, just checking in. Your mom's been saying some stuff about you. Everything okay?" I called him. "What's she saying?" He hesitated. "Look, I don't want to get in the middle of it, but she told Aunt Deb you and Claire are having money problems and that you're taking it out on Evan. She said that's why you skipped the family trip last year." I let out a sharp laugh. "Money problems? We paid for half that trip before she uninvited us." "I know, man. I just figured you'd want to know." I thanked him, hung up, and sat there staring at the wall. It wasn't just petty gossip anymore. She was rewriting the story completely, painting herself as the victim, me as the bitter son, and Evan as the collateral damage. Then came the final straw. It was Evan's birthday in early February. Claire and I planned a small party at home, just his classmates, a few neighbors, nothing fancy. He wanted a dinosaur theme. We decorated the living room with green balloons, a cardboard volcano, and a cake shaped like a T-Rex head. He was so excited. Halfway through the party, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "I dropped off a gift for Evan at your door. Don't say I never do anything for him." I frowned and went to check. Sitting on the porch was a wrapped box with a gold bow. Against my better judgment, I brought it inside. Claire looked uneasy. "What do you think it is?" "No idea," I said. "But let's wait until after the party to open it." When the kids left and Evan started tearing through his gifts, he got to the one from Mom last. He looked at me for permission. I hesitated, then nodded. He unwrapped it carefully, pulling off the bow. Inside was a brand new smartwatch, the same kind Mom had given everyone except him at Christmas. But that wasn't the shocking part. Taped to the box was a note, a handwritten one. "For my favorite grandson. Maybe now you've earned it. Love, Grandma." The air went out of the room. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. Evan froze, staring at the note. "She called me her favorite," he said quietly, almost confused. I took the note gently from his hand, my pulse pounding. "Buddy, she's just trying to make up for Christmas," I said, forcing calm. But inside, I was burning. Because that wasn't an apology. That was a message. A message to me. To Claire. To everyone. She decided who was deserving. I wanted to throw the watch in the trash, but Evan was already holding it up, looking at the glowing screen. "It's cool," he said, smiling faintly. "Maybe Grandma isn't mad anymore." Claire looked at me helplessly. "We can't take it from him," she whispered. "I know," I said, my voice low. but she knows exactly what she's doing. That night, after Evan went to bed, I turned the watch over in my hands. It wasn't just a watch. It was connected, syncing automatically to Mom's phone through the setup app. She'd used my name on the tag, meaning she had access to it. I checked the settings and saw it immediately. Location tracking, enabled. Claire, I said slowly. She's tracking him. Her eyes widened. What? She set up family sharing through her account. She can see where he is. That's sick, Claire said, snatching the watch from my hand. She's spying on her own grandson? I nodded grimly. She's not just trying to control him. She's trying to control us. We disabled the tracking and reset the device, but the realization lingered. She'd crossed a line so deeply that there was no coming back. The next day, I drove to her house. Claire didn't want me to, but I couldn't sit still anymore. When she opened the door, her face lit up like she'd been expecting me. Jake finally decided to visit. I held up the box. You gave Evan a tracking watch. She blinked. I gave him a gift. You set it up under your account. She crossed her arms. So what? I just wanted to keep an eye on him in case something happened. He's my son, Mom. Not your project. Oh, please, she scoffed. If you were doing such a great job raising him, I wouldn't have to worry. That's when it slipped out, the thing I'd been holding back for years. You don't worry, Mom. You control everyone. You humiliate. You manipulate. And when someone finally pushes back, you act like a victim. Her face darkened. Don't you dare talk to me like that. You ungrateful boy. I'm not a boy anymore, I said quietly. And Evan's never going to go through what I did. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You think you can take him away from me? You won't. I'm still his grandmother. I met her eyes. Not for long. That night, Claire and I blocked her number. We cut contact completely. No calls. No texts. No visits. Evan didn't understand at first, but after a while, he stopped asking to see her. The silence was heavy, but peaceful. Until, a month later, something arrived in the mail. A thick envelope, stamped from Mom's lawyer. Inside was a formal letter. She was suing for grandparent visitation rights. Claire's hand trembled as she read it aloud. She's taking us to court. And in that moment, standing there in my kitchen, I realized this wasn't just family drama anymore. It was war, and I was done playing nice. When I first read the letter, I thought it had to be a joke. My mother suing me for grandparent visitation rights. It sounded absurd, like something out of a bad movie. But it wasn't. Her name was printed right there at the top of the page, followed by a lawyer's signature. I remember sitting at the kitchen table staring at it, feeling the blood drain from my face. Claire was pacing back and forth, her voice shaking. This is insane, Jake. She can't actually, can she? I didn't answer at first. I just kept reading. The words blurred together. Petition for visitation, in the best interest of the child, previously significant relationship. Legal language that boiled down to one thing. My mother believed she was entitled to control my son's life. She's serious, I finally said. She actually did it. Claire dropped onto a chair, rubbing her temples. We just wanted distance. We didn't even say she couldn't ever see him again. We just needed space. Doesn't matter, I said bitterly. She doesn't want space. She wants power. And this is how she gets it. That night, we barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Evan's face when he found that note on the watch. Maybe now you've earned it. I kept thinking about what would happen if she actually won this case. If some court ordered me to hand my son over to a woman who had humiliated, manipulated, and spied on him, just because she played the doting grandmother in public. I called my dad the next morning, half expecting him to be horrified. Instead, his voice was low and cautious, like he'd already been coached. Jake, he said, maybe it's not as bad as it sounds. Your mother just wants to see her grandson. She wants control, I said through clenched teeth. She called his school, tracked him, and now she's using the courts. Don't pretend you don't see what's happening. He sighed. You know how she gets. If you just talk to her. I did talk to her. She just doesn't listen. She thinks you're being vindictive. I laughed bitterly. Yeah, because I won't let her manipulate my 8-year-old. Jake, he said again, quieter now. You know your mother loves that boy. She doesn't know what love is, Dad. She knows possession. He didn't answer for a long time. Then, finally, I can't get in the middle of this. You already are, I said softly. You just don't realize it. When I hung up, I realized I had no allies left in that side of the family. Megan had already taken Mom's side, and now Dad was doing his usual act, staying quiet, staying neutral, pretending that neutrality wasn't its own kind of betrayal. Claire found me later that day, sitting on the edge of Evan's bed. He was at school, his dinosaurs lined up neatly on the windowsill. I was holding one of his drawings, a sketch of a knight standing between a dragon and a small child. He sees it, I said quietly. He doesn't know the details, but he feels the war happening around him. Claire sat beside me. Then we end it. I looked at her. You mean fight it? I mean protect him, whatever it takes, she said. Even if it means cutting them out completely. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork and stress. We found a family lawyer, a calm, soft-spoken woman named Janet who didn't waste time sugarcoating things. This isn't uncommon, she explained during our first meeting. Some grandparents feel entitled to visitation, especially if they believe the parents are acting out of anger. She's acting out of control, I said. Janet nodded. We'll need to prove that. Any documentation, messages, or witnesses who can show a pattern of emotional manipulation, that will help. Claire and I spent hours gathering evidence. Screenshots of Mom's texts, the tracking setup from the watch, the school email, even the family group post where she painted me as an ungrateful son. Piece by piece, we built the case, and each piece felt like peeling off another layer of what I'd tried for years to ignore. But as the court date drew closer, the pressure started taking a toll. I wasn't eating much. Claire was barely sleeping. Evan started asking questions. Why are you always talking to the lawyer lady? And is Grandma still mad? We tried to keep him shielded, but kids are perceptive. They know when something's wrong, even if you pretend everything's fine. Then came the visit from Child Services. Apparently, as part of Mom's filing, she'd made another concern report, claiming that Evan was being emotionally isolated and that she feared for his developmental well-being. It was all phrased just carefully enough to sound legitimate. The caseworker who showed up was kind, but her questions made me sick to my stomach. Does Evan have his own space in the house? Does he seem withdrawn at home or school? Has there been any physical discipline? Claire was shaking by the end of it. This is humiliating, she said as the caseworker left. She wants to break us, I said. She wants to make us look unstable so she can rescue him. That night, I sat in the dark living room, staring at the Christmas photo she'd posted, the one where everyone was smiling except the empty space where Evan should have been. My whole childhood came rushing back in flashes. The times she'd pit me against Megan. The times she'd say things like, "You're lucky I even let you stay under my roof," or "You'd be nothing without me." I'd spent years trying to believe she could change, but this was the final confirmation that she never would. Claire came in quietly, a blanket wrapped around her. She sat beside me, resting her head on my shoulder. "We're going to lose friends over this," she whispered. "Family too." "I already have," I said. She was silent for a while. Then, softly, "Do you regret walking out that night?" I shook my head. Not for a second. The first hearing came in late February. Mom showed up in a cream-colored suit, smiling at everyone like she was attending a brunch instead of a legal proceeding. Megan sat beside her, arms folded, glaring at us. Dad was there too, but he kept his head down. The judge was polite but formal, explaining the purpose of the hearing. Mom's lawyer spoke first, painting her as a devoted grandmother who'd been wrongly alienated from her grandchild. He used phrases like loving involvement and stable influence. When it was our turn, Janet stood and calmly listed the facts: the tracking watch, the school interference, the humiliation at Christmas. Mom interrupted several times, trying to defend herself. "That's ridiculous," she snapped at one point. "I was joking about the watch, and the school needed to know what was going on." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Taylor, please refrain from speaking out of turn." I'll never forget the look she gave me then. That cold, furious glare, the same one I saw when I was a kid and she realized she couldn't control me anymore. It was the look that said, "You will regret this." The hearing ended without a decision. It would go to mediation first. But by the time we walked out of that courtroom, I felt smaller than I had in years. The woman who'd hurt my son was now smiling and chatting with court staff, like she hadn't just tried to destroy our lives. That was my rock bottom. I remember sitting in the car afterward, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Claire reached for my hand, but I couldn't even look at her. I felt like I'd failed, as a husband, as a father, as a son trying to protect his own family from the person who'd raised him. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stared out the window at the empty street. I thought about calling her. I even picked up the phone. Maybe I could reason with her, appeal to something human inside her. But then I remembered her laugh that night at dinner. "You still owe me for dinner." The smugness. The entitlement. I set the phone down and walked outside instead. The air was cold enough to sting my face. I stood there for a long time, breathing it in, grounding myself in the quiet. And that's when it hit me. I couldn't win this by reacting. That's what she wanted. Chaos. Drama. A stage to perform her martyrdom. If I was going to protect Evan, I had to stop fighting her the way she expected. I had to outthink her. From that night forward, something in me shifted. I started keeping records of everything. Every message, every call, every attempt she made to reach out through other people. I researched grandparent visitation laws. I read stories of parents who'd fought similar battles. And slowly, quietly, I began to plan. It wasn't revenge, not yet. Not the satisfying, cinematic kind, anyway. It was something colder, strategic, controlled. Because I realized something that night, staring out at the empty street. You can't win a game against someone who changes the rules every time they lose. You have to stop playing entirely and make sure they can't touch the board again. So I waited. I gathered. I prepared. Because I knew that if my mother wanted a war, she was about to get one she couldn't control. The shift didn't happen overnight. At first, it was just a quiet sense of focus, like someone had turned down the noise in my head after months of chaos. I still woke up early, still went to work, still made breakfast for Evan before school. But under the routine, something had changed. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was building. The court case was ongoing, but I started treating it like a problem to solve rather than a fight to survive. Every night after Evan went to bed, I'd sit at the kitchen table with Claire, our laptops open, going through messages, screenshots, and timelines. We documented everything meticulously. I'd learned that family drama could be dismissed as she said, but paper trails don't lie. Janet, our lawyer, noticed the difference almost immediately. "You're getting good at this," she said during one meeting. "Most people burn out halfway through cases like this, but you're getting sharper." "I've dealt with my mom my whole life," I said dryly. "This is just the first time I have witnesses." In the months that followed, my professional life started improving too. Maybe it was because I was channeling my anger into something productive. I'd always been good at my job, mid-level project manager for a logistics company, but now I was performing like I had something to prove. I volunteered for harder assignments, led teams with more confidence, and, for the first time in years, I started getting noticed. In March, my boss called me into his office. "Jake, you've been killing it lately," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I want you to oversee the new branch integration. Big project. It's yours if you want it." I accepted on the spot. The raise wasn't life-changing, but it gave us breathing room. And more importantly, it reminded me of something I'd forgotten. I wasn't powerless. Claire noticed the change too. "You've got your spark back," she said one night as we cleaned up dinner. "Maybe," I said, smiling faintly. "Or maybe I'm just tired of feeling small." Evan was thriving again, too. With the tension easing at home, he started opening up more. He joined an art club at school, and when his teacher showed us his sketchbook during the spring conference, I almost teared up. His drawings had changed, brighter colors, confident lines. The kid who once drew himself in the corner of every picture was now drawing himself in the center, next to dinosaurs and dragons and suns with smiling faces. He didn't mention my mom anymore, but once in a while, I caught him glancing at his old smartwatch sitting on the shelf. I didn't take it away. It was a symbol, a reminder of what we'd overcome. Then, in April, something unexpected happened. Out of nowhere, my dad called. I hadn't heard from him since the first court hearing. His voice was low, careful. "Jake," he said, "I need to tell you something." "Dad," I said cautiously. "What's going on?" "I think your mother's overstepped again." It turned out Mom had been trying to get letters to Evan through his school, actual handwritten notes addressed directly to him. The school secretary, who remembered the earlier incident, had flagged it and contacted my dad. The letters never reached Evan, but they made their way to Janet's desk within days. Each one was dripping with emotional manipulation. "Grandma misses you. Daddy doesn't want us to be a family. If you love me, draw me a picture." That was the moment Janet smiled for the first time in this whole case. "This is gold," she said. It's not just overstepping. It's evidence of emotional coercion. The court won't like this. The next mediation session went differently. Mom's composure started to crack. When Janet presented the letters, Mom's face went pale, then red. "Those were private," she snapped. The mediator raised an eyebrow. "Private correspondence to a minor through his school?" Mom's lawyer tried to smooth it over, but the damage was done. That was the first time I saw my mother lose control in public. For once, she couldn't spin the story. The paper spoke for itself. That night, after the session, Claire and I went out for dinner. Just the two of us. No tension, no fear, no whispering over what Mom might do next. We talked about normal things again. Movies, vacations, even the idea of buying a small cabin somewhere quiet. I remember sitting across from her, thinking, I forgot what peace feels like. But the biggest change came a month later. My company's branch integration project, the one I'd been leading, turned out to be a massive success. The board recognized me with a promotion, regional operations director, a bigger salary, better hours, and a bonus that would cover every legal bill we had left. When I told Claire, she hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "We're finally free," she whispered. It wasn't just the money. It was what it represented. For years, my mother had used financial manipulation as a weapon, subtle guilt trips about who paid for what, little reminders that I owed her. But now, for the first time in my life, I didn't owe her anything. Not a cent. We celebrated quietly that night, just the three of us. Evan drew a picture of the three of us standing together under a big yellow sun. In the corner, there was a shadowy figure walking away. I didn't ask who it was. I already knew. By summer, the court had finally ruled in our favor. The judge dismissed my mother's petition, citing a concerning pattern of overreach and inappropriate conduct. She was warned that any further interference could result in a restraining order. When the verdict was read, Mom didn't look at me. She just stared straight ahead, lips pressed together so tightly they turned white. Megan muttered something under her breath as they left the courtroom, but I didn't hear it. For the first time, I didn't care. After that, life really began to feel different. Evan had his first school art showcase that fall. His piece, a huge mural of a tree with people of all shapes and colors climbing its branches, won a district award. Claire and I stood in the back of the room, watching him beam as his teacher called his name. I'd never seen him so confident. Driving home that night, he said something that stuck with me. "Dad, remember when you said bad people sometimes make you stronger?" "Yeah," I said, glancing in the rearview mirror. He smiled. "Then Grandma made us really strong." I laughed, but there was a lump in my throat. He didn't say it with bitterness. He said it with peace. Like he understood that strength didn't come from hate. It came from surviving what was meant to break you. After that, I stopped checking social media entirely. Mom still posted her perfect family photos, still acted like the benevolent matriarch of her small world. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't living for her approval. Claire and I started planning a family trip, just us and Evan, somewhere far from all the noise. We picked the mountains, a cabin surrounded by pine trees and quiet mornings. The kind of place where peace wasn't just an idea, it was a presence. And on one of those mornings, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee in hand, I realized something that made me smile. I'd stopped waiting for the apology that would never come. Mom hadn't changed. She never would. But I had. I'd gone from defending myself to defining myself. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need her validation to feel whole. But peace has a funny way of being temporary. Because just when I thought she'd finally left us alone, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. A hesitant voice on the other end said, "Mr. Taylor? This is Patricia from Greenwood Assisted Living. We have your mother here with us, and there's something you should probably know." And just like that, after nearly a year of silence, her name was back in my life. The voice on the phone was polite but hesitant, like she'd made this call before and knew it rarely went well. "Your mother has been living here for the past few months," the woman explained. "She listed you as her emergency contact. We don't typically call family for small issues, but she's run into some financial trouble." Financial trouble. The words hung in the air. For most people, that would have meant missed payments or late fees. But for my mother, who'd spent her whole life flaunting control and money like weapons, it meant something deeper. Desperation. I asked carefully, "What kind of trouble?" "She's several months behind on her room and care payments," the woman said. And she's been using our office phone to contact family members, but no one seems to respond. She mentioned you might be willing to help. Of course she did. I almost laughed. I'm not responsible for her bills, I said calmly. She has her own accounts. I understand, the woman replied gently. But she's mentioned that she might be evicted if the balance isn't paid soon. I just thought you should know. When I hung up, Claire looked at me from across the room. She could tell by my expression that something had shifted. What did she do now? She didn't do anything, I said, my voice low. She's finally running out of moves. Claire tilted her head. And what are you thinking? I'm thinking, I said slowly, that karma just sent me an invitation. For the next few days, I didn't contact her. I wanted to see what she'd do. Sure enough, by the end of the week, she found a way, an email from an address I hadn't seen in months. The subject line was short, "Please help me." Inside, it was exactly what I expected. Jake, I know you're angry, but I'm in a terrible situation. The home is threatening to remove me, and Megan can't help right now. You're still my son. You wouldn't let your mother end up on the street, would you? Please call me. I'm sorry for everything. Sorry for everything. I read that line twice. Not because I believed it, but because it was the first time in my life she'd written it down. I could almost picture her saying it with that practiced softness she used when she wanted something. Claire saw the email and said, "So what are you going to do? Ignore her?" I shook my head. "No," I said quietly. "I'm going to help her. Just not in the way she expects." I waited 2 days before calling the nursing home back. I asked to speak directly with the administrator and requested a detailed statement of her balance and account history. When I got the file, I noticed something interesting. The home she'd chosen wasn't some modest care facility. It was one of the most expensive in the state. Private suite, lake view, weekly spa treatments, catered meals. She'd been living like royalty, and now her funds were gone. The next day, I called her. She picked up instantly. "Jake." "Oh, thank goodness. I thought you'd blocked me again." "I almost did," I said evenly. "I got your email." "Oh, honey," she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound rehearsed. "I've been so scared. They said I might have to leave. I know I haven't been the best mother, but surely you can. Pay for it." I interrupted. "I could, but I won't." Silence. Then, coldly, "Excuse me. I'm not paying for your choices, Mom. Not anymore. You made your bed, and it's a very expensive one, apparently." Her voice sharpened. "How dare you speak to me that way? I'm your mother." "Exactly," I said. "You're the woman who tracked my child, called the police on us, and dragged us into court. You wanted control, Mom. Now you have it. You're in full control of your own mess." Before she could respond, I added, "But I do have a proposal for you." She hesitated, wary. "What kind of proposal?" "I've been promoted at work. I'm in charge of corporate partnerships now, including charity allocations. I could make a donation, not to you, but to the home. A restricted one." "What does that mean?" she asked slowly. "It means I'll pay for 1 year of care, anonymously, under the condition that they downgrade you to a shared room and remove all luxury extras. No spa days, no personal chef, just standard care. And in return, you sign an agreement through their legal department that you'll have no contact with me, Claire, or Evan ever again." There was a long, loaded silence. Then came her voice, small and trembling. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious," I said. "Take it or leave it. I'm not giving you control, Mom. I'm giving you peace, the kind you took from everyone else." She tried to guilt me. Of course she did. There were tears, accusations, even a rant about how ungrateful children destroy families. But I didn't flinch. For once, I wasn't the scared son defending himself. I was the adult in control. Calm, grounded, untouchable. 2 days later, the nursing home called. She'd signed the agreement. I kept my word. I made the payment, set the conditions, and even sent a note to the director ensuring that she'd receive the basic care she needed. But that was it. No contact. No drama. A month later, I received a short letter in the mail. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Inside, a single line. "You've humiliated me for the last time." I smiled faintly, not in triumph, in peace. Because for the first time in my life, her anger didn't matter. She could rant, she could blame, she could twist the story all she wanted. But I'd taken away the one thing she could never stand to lose, her audience. Evan never knew the details. We just told him Grandma was living somewhere quiet now. And every time he asked if she was okay, I told him the truth. Yeah, buddy. She's fine. She's finally learning what peace looks like. Months later, on Evan's 10th birthday, we had a small celebration in the backyard. Just us, a few close friends, and a cake he helped bake. As the sun set, he ran up to me with one of his drawings, the three of us standing on a mountain under a bright sky. No shadows this time. You like it? He asked. I looked at it for a long time. Yeah, kiddo. I really do. As he ran off, Claire wrapped her arm around me and whispered, You really did it, you know. Did what? You broke the cycle. I nodded slowly, watching the last bit of daylight fade. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I just learned how to stop giving her the power she never deserved. Either way, for the first time in years, maybe ever, it felt like the story was finally mine. It was 6 months later when I got the call. I was in my office, wrapping up a project meeting, when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something made me answer. A soft, steady voice said, Mr. Taylor? This is Diane from Greenwood Assisted Living. I'm sorry to inform you that your mother passed away early this morning. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the wall. Not shocked, not even sad, just quiet. The kind of silence that comes when a storm finally ends after years of lightning and noise. Diane went on gently, explaining that my mother had suffered a sudden stroke. It was peaceful, she said. She was in her room when it happened. She didn't suffer. She paused. I'm sorry for your loss. I thanked her, hung up, and sat there with the phone still in my hand. My loss. The phrase didn't land the way it used to. There was nothing left to lose. Not anymore. When I got home, Claire met me at the door. She saw my face and knew before I said a word. It happened, she asked quietly. I nodded. She hugged me, tight, but I wasn't crying. I couldn't. There was too much history, too much damage layered over any grief that might have been there once. Evan was in the living room, drawing. When we told him, he went quiet for a while. Then he asked, was she still mad at us? I knelt down next to him. I don't think she was mad, buddy, I said softly. I think she was just tired. He nodded slowly, processing that in his own way. Can we still draw her in the sky? Like one of the stars? I smiled. Yeah, I think she'd like that. We didn't have a funeral. Megan arranged a small service in their hometown. I didn't go, but my dad called afterward. He sounded older somehow, like the years of keeping the peace had finally caught up with him. It was quiet, he said. Not many people showed up. Megan said Mom didn't want a big ceremony. That sounds like her, I said. All appearances, even at the end. He hesitated. She left something for you. A week later, a small envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a folded note written in her familiar, looping cursive. Jake, you always thought I was cruel. Maybe I was. But I wanted you to be strong. You are. Don't let anyone make you soft again. I read it twice, then set it on the table and exhaled. That was her final act. No apology, no reflection, just a warning disguised as wisdom. It was the most fitting goodbye she could have given. Claire asked what it said. I told her, exactly what I expected. Then I slipped the note into a drawer and never opened it again. In the weeks that followed, life didn't change dramatically. The world didn't stop spinning. The sky didn't darken. But there was this lightness in the house, subtle, steady, and real. Evan started drawing again, this time scenes of nature, mountains, and oceans. He said they made him feel calm. I understood. One evening that summer, we drove up to the cabin in the mountains. It had become our escape, the place where all the noise of the world disappeared. As the sun dipped below the trees, Evan pointed up at the night sky, where the first stars were starting to appear. That one's Grandma, he said simply, pointing to a bright one near the horizon. Yeah, I asked. How do you know? She's watching to see if we're okay, he said. I smiled faintly. Then she finally learned how to watch without controlling. Claire leaned into me, whispering, You think she ever realized what she did? I thought about it for a long moment. Maybe, I said quietly. But even if she didn't, I did. And that's enough. We sat there until the stars filled the sky. Evan eventually fell asleep against my arm, and Claire's hand found mine. There was no bitterness left, only peace, like the last quiet breath after a lifetime of noise. For the first time, I didn't feel like the boy she raised or the son she tried to control. I was just me, a father, a husband, a man who finally understood that strength isn't inherited. It's built. The next morning, Before we left the cabin, I took one last look at the sunrise. I pulled my mother's final note from my pocket, read it once more, and then, without hesitation, let it fall into the fire pit. The flames caught fast, curling the paper into blackened ash that rose with the smoke and drifted into the sky. "Goodbye, Mom," I said quietly. "You taught me what not to become." And as the last ember faded, I finally felt what I'd been chasing my whole life. Not revenge, not victory, but peace. The kind that comes only when you stop fighting the past and start living for the people who never made you prove you were worthy of love.